So how do you drain your sprinkler system? And what are some pro tips on blowing out your sprinkler system? Those are coming up next. Let's talk about air compressors for a second. You can use different types. I use not every type, that's exaggerating. I've used several types of air compressors to blow out sprinkler systems, and you can do it with any kind pretty much. Basically, if it pushes compressed air, you can blow the system out. How you do it depends on what compressor you have, how long it takes depends on what compressor you have. There's the reciprocating ones, which are usually electric. There's the rotary screw ones, which are usually diesel, sometimes gas, and those are usually towed behind a truck and quite expensive, but very efficient. I built one. It's an electric compressor, solar powered, and it has its own trailer. If you're interested in the solar power compressor trailer, let me know in the comments below and subscribe. So then when I have a video come out, you'll know it. But it's a really cool trailer, so I'll show you that later. I have my favorites, which are usually the rotary screw compressors, the tow behind ones. Those are so efficient. But if you're just going to blow out a handful of them, you can use an electric reciprocating air compressor. It'll work fine. It takes a little longer, but it works good. Here is an electric air compressor. This is a reciprocating air compressor, meaning that it fills the tank, dumps it, fills the tank, dumps it. So it's reciprocating. It's 29 gallons, 165 psi, 5.3 CFM at 90 psi, 1.8 running horsepower. This compressor works great for your own home or doing one or two houses, maybe you and the neighbors, or a couple of them in a day. But this one takes a little bit longer than your rotary screw compressor, which is usually the diesel tow behind ones. But this one, you can adjust the pressure. It works really good. I would recommend one of these if you're just doing a couple of them. So here's another type of air compressor. It's electric. This is the little pancake air compressor. They're usually like 6 gallons. Sometimes they're smaller than that. Sometimes they're a little bit bigger. These will work, but it will take you a long time to do it. And it's not a guarantee to get all the air out. For most home applications, this is perfectly acceptable, but that's what these little guys are. They work, but if you're going to do a lot of blowouts, go with a bigger tank. Let's talk about how much pressure you need to blow out a sprinkler system and how much volume or CFM you need. There's arguments about that. Of course there is. You don't want a lot of pressure. You want more volume is the key. A lot of people will say, well, if you don't have the volume, turn up the pressure. That works, but it's risky. A lot of people use the electric reciprocating compressors, and those you kind of have to have higher pressure to push the air out. That's why they're not used often by professionals, although they are used by professionals sometimes. The more important thing is having the right amount of pressure. I've blown out sprinkler systems with as little as 50 psi. Usually it's around 80 psi. I still keep my head out of the way of any parts or sprinkler heads. I've had them blow off before. And so I try and always wear safety glasses, of course, and stay away from any parts like that with my head. But I've blown it out as little as 50 psi. I've gone as high as 150 psi. I don't recommend it. Learn from that. Keep it about 80 psi and you should be good. Now, CFM, what does that mean? Here you can see 5.3 SCFM at 90 psi. So basically you're looking at cubic feet per minute. So this one has a large air tank. It's got capabilities of going to 165 psi. When you get to 90 psi, you should be pushing 5.3 cubic feet of air through these hoses. So how many cubic feet do you need? How much CFM do you need for blowing out a sprinkler system? There is a formula. Basically, they say take your gallons per minute that your sprinkler system uses and divide it by 7.5. That should give you the amount of CFM of air you need to blow out your sprinkler system. I'll give you an example. An average home usually has between 10 and 15 gallons per minute with a sprinkler system, depending on how it's designed. Most of them are less than that. So let's say 10, right? So your sprinkler system zone, one sprinkler system zone is using 10 gallons a minute. Divide that by 7.5, you get 1.5 or something. I'm just throwing that out there because it doesn't matter. 2 CFM or less, basically. So If you had 2 CFM, technically the formula says that you should be able to blow out your sprinklers on. But it's not just about a burst of volume at once. You have to push that volume through hundreds of feet of pipe, possibly, or thousands of feet of pipe, and then through several different sprinkler heads. So if you see a compressor that says 1.5 or 2 CFM, that means I can blow out my sprinkler system without a problem. You could blow it out, but it's going to take time to do it. On the other side of the spectrum, you see those rotary screw compressors, the toe behinds. They're very efficient. Those have instant cubic feet as per demand. So if there's a big sprinkler system, they usually adjust, especially the newer ones, and they'll push more out. That is a constant flow of CFM, and it pushes all that water out nice and evenly through all the heads. It goes quick, and it does a great job. But how much do you need there? Well, you see some that say 500 on the side, 225, 285, 185, 90. You see a lot of those. If you're doing mostly residential blowouts, or you're doing just a few homes, or you and your neighbors, and you rented one of those for the day, that's awesome. You don't need one that's 250 CFM. You barely need one that's 185. If you got an air compressor that was 85 CFM, you'd be fine. Now, if you're doing commercial projects, large locations, you might want more than that. There's been a few places where I've had to use 2 of those large air compressors at, I think one of them was 185 and one was 225 to blow out the sprinkler system efficiently. It's rare when you'll need that, but for the most part, if you had 85 CFM to 185 CFM on a toe behind, you can do 99% of homes and even commercial accounts. We'll start with a pair of channel locks. These are my best friends. I'm not that lonely, they are just that handy. So these are amazing because not only can you adjust the sizes for different connections, plugs, couplers, keep 2 of them on hand, because these connections you can do sometimes with your hand, but a lot of times it's best to use 2 of them, tighten them if you need to loosen them if you need to. One of them I always keep with me while I'm doing the blowout. I just slide the handle into my belt loop or my leather belt, and it comes with me everywhere I go. You can also use this to open valve boxes. You can use it for anything you can imagine. Next thing that's pretty useful, just a flathead screwdriver. This one is a multi-use, so you have different bits on it, Phillips and a flathead. But I'll show you my absolute favorite tool. This Milwaukee utility knife is probably my most useful tool that I carry around with me. So not only do you have the utility knife and a line cutter here, this particular one has a built-in screwdriver. So you've got a flathead end on this side and then a Phillips end on this side, and you can rotate them around. I use this every single day, dozens of times every day, and they last forever. I highly, highly recommend one of these. I'm not getting paid by Milwaukee. I wish I was, but I absolutely love these utility knives. You also have a bottle opener right there and a belt clip. So this and this never leave me when I'm doing any kind of sprinkler blowout, or even sprinkler work for that matter, landscaping work in general. These are my buddies right here. So here we've got some variety of air hose connections. So this is just a 1/4 inch industrial connection, M style, which is pretty common. This is probably one of the most useful air hose connections that you're going to have. You can also get bushings that will adjust the size up to 1/2 inch, and a bushing up to 3/4 inch. And you can even go up to 1 inch if you want as well. But having different size bushings comes in really handy. Here's another type of connection. You can get these shut-off ball valves. Any hardware store, you can order them online. This is a female plug here going into the ball valve shutoff, and then you've got a coupler on this side. This way you can connect into your plug and then control the air flow here. So these are really handy. Here's another style. This has a female spigot for your hose, your garden hose connection. This is really handy because you can thread it right onto a garden hose spigot that is installed on the backflow if you have one. This one I bought online. It's okay. It's kind of cheap. The thread here tends to leak a little bit. You can always put Teflon tape on these connections. Sometimes it's required. Sometimes when you buy them, it has something that's already on there. But this one is a connection for a garden hose. The manufacturers always recommend connecting to the backflow after the backflow. So not on the inlet side, but on the outlet side after the second ball valve. That way you're not blowing air through the backflow and damaging any components inside. There's a lot of plastic and rubber components. One time probably is not going to do any damage, probably, but if you do it multiple times, it definitely can do some damage. So these kind of connections are really handy if you're connecting after the backflow, because you can find the female connections there, or sometimes people will install a garden hose connection. So these are pretty handy. These are the ones I recommend if you're going to be using a 1/4-inch air hose for your common household tools or air guns or whatever. You have the air hoses already, and I'll show you what those air hoses look like. Here is the air hose that a lot of people use. It's just a 1/4-inch. It's pretty standard for tools, pneumatic tools. This is a quick coupler right here. These are really handy. They're lightweight. They're easy to move around, but they also don't have as much volume of air. But these work really good if you're using electronic or electric air compressor. If you have to connect to the backflow through one of the test cocks, one of the test ports here, having a couple of these on hand is really handy, because you can take the one on the backflow, take it off, thread this one in, and this fits your standard air hose plug right here. You can thread it in, make the connection to your air hose, and go for it. You can use the ball valve that you built here, or you can use this with a screwdriver. It acts as a ball valve as well. So you have it on right there parallel with the pipe, or now it's perpendicular, so now it's shut off. I would also recommend getting a 90-degree brass fitting. It's a 1/4-inch brass female connection. It's also a female on this end, but I've put a nipple here, a 1/4-inch nipple, male on both sides, and this is really good for those tight spaces if the backflow is right in a corner or something. So now we're going to move on to a different type of air hose connection, and that is the Chicago style air hose connection. Some people call it a duck foot. These are very different than what you would normally find at a hardware store. These kind of connections are difficult. You have to kind of go to a specialty store for that or order them online. But these are great because it doesn't matter what size hose you have, 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch, the couplers are all the same size. These are good because it's just a simple 1/4 twist and it's locked together, it's sealed up, and then you twist them apart and they're good to go. The only one of the main differences is when this is disconnected, this is always open. Air will constantly blow out through it. So never disconnect them while the air is blowing through a hose. That is dangerous. Don't do that. I use these a lot. So this is probably the most common one I use, this connection. It has the spigot connection, the garden hose connection right here with a ring. But this connection right here swivels. You thread this right on, make your air hose connection, and it works fantastic. Now, when you are doing that, they recommend using a clip. When you connect to your hose, put it together, and then this pin goes through them. That way you can't twist them. They will never come apart on accident. Safety, keep this pin with you. This is the next most popular connection that I use. So it's just a 1/4-inch nipple, and this can be different lengths. And then here I have the test cock already connected, usually together. This is not recommended you blow out through the backflow or before the backflow, but sometimes it's the only way to do it without tearing into the backflow or cutting into the pipe. So it's handy to have one. Another one with the PVC here. Be careful when you're threading in a metal male into a plastic female. You can over tighten it and this can crack. So be very careful doing this. Here's a swivel connection. So this is the exact opposite of this. So this is male by male. This is female by female. This is your iron pipe thread. This is your garden hose thread. You can tell not only because of the coarseness of the threads, but also it has the rubber seal, the O-ring right there. This goes into the garden hose side. Here are the hoses that I was talking about that are the Chicago style. They're much heavier duty. They will push out a lot more air, but they do take that Chicago style connection. And these usually are for compressors that are towed behind the truck for the vehicle. So it's nice to have at least probably 75 feet of this kind of hose in your truck. So we've talked about basic tools you'll need for blowing out your sprinkler system. We've talked about a couple different air hose connections and types of air hoses and some air compressors. Now we'll get more into the process. I came up with a form of steps that I thought would be the best way to do it. I think there's 8 steps to go through every house that you blow out so that you didn't miss anything. So looking at this first step, open all valve boxes, open any manifold drains. Now I don't open all the valve boxes at the same time. I do it one at a time if I need to. Now number 2, slightly open backflow, open bleeder valves. That way, when I go into the basement to shut off the irrigation valve and open the drain inside, it goes really quickly because it's like taking your thumb off the end of a straw. That water just shoots back in the house. So you can see the main line coming in from the basement, coming up. There's the main shutoff. Follow that up and you'll see that it goes over to the water filter and then the water heater and everything else. But right here we have a T that goes up. This is the sprinkler shutoff and this is the sprinkler drain. So I'm going to shut this off now. And you can hear that the water is off. Then we'll open this up and drain it. You can flip these, you can shut off the irrigation and then open a drain and then go outside and open the backflow and the bleeder valves, but it's just an extra step. Also, I misspelled then. So number 4, shut off second valve on backflow. That's the one on the outlet side of the backflow. Then you connect the air hose after the backflow. This is important. The most manufacturers of backflows recommend that you connect after the backflow. It's common sense. You don't want to blow dry air through all the rubber seals, the gaskets, plastic at high pressure. It can dry them out, crack them, break them. Then you can open one valve at a time, blow air through until all water is out or expelled. This you can do by opening the valves themselves, the solenoids themselves in the valve boxes, or using the clock to open them up. One thing to remember is make sure that there is always a valve open when the compressor is running. That way it doesn't build up pressure and create a safety hazard later for you. Number 6, after last zone is clear, open all the valves manually. You can still do this, but you don't have to. You can leave the valves closed, especially if you can't locate all the valves. Sometimes you can't find them. So using the clock to blow the system out is perfectly fine. And you can leave the valves, the solenoids, closed if you want. If you want to leave them open, that's fine. But it's easier to start the sprinkler system back up in the spring if all of them are closed. Then go back, make sure all the valves, drains, bleeder valves are open halfway. On the backflow, you'll see that they are turned to a 45-degree angle. This allows all the air to go through and drain the water that's there, leaving them at a halfway open or 45 degrees. Then shut off the clock, put all the lids back on the boxes, get all your hoses and tools. I have lost so many tools because I was in a hurry and I left one around the house somewhere. I've been doing blowouts for a long time, as a lot of people have. It always makes me think how much water will freeze pipes. Water expands when it freezes about 9%. How much water should you blow out so that you can save your sprinkler system? Let's see what happens when I take sections of pipe and fill them with different amounts of water and leave them outside during a snowstorm. Check out these videos. We'll see you on the next one.